The room fell silent when Dr. Miriam Carter stepped to the front. Her voice cut through the thick tension. The cure is in the gene sequence. It's right here. All it needs is the right approach. And then they laughed. It wasn't the laugh of confusion. It was worse. It was the laugh of dismissal, because they refused to see. I thought, maybe if I showed them again, maybe if I proved the data one more time, they'd listen. They'd see the potential. They'd give me the chance. She was wrong. This wasn't about science. It was about something deeper, something more ingrained than the data she was showing them. On that cold afternoon in a sleek, sterile lab, Dr. Miriam Carter, one of the brightest neuroscientists of her generation, stood in front of the very people who should have been her allies. She had spent years, maybe even her whole career, working towards this moment, unveiling a breakthrough, a potential cure for a rare neurodegenerative disease that had baffled the greatest minds for centuries. But instead of curiosity, she was met with only skepticism. At the front of the room, Dr. Henry Westfield, older, established, and white, looked at her, not as a colleague but as a threat to his authority. "I think you're mistaken," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. He folded his arms as if her words were beneath him. "You've run these trials on a flawed premise. How do you explain a cure for a disease no one's even come close to solving for centuries?" Her heart raced, but her voice never faltered. She couldn't let him see the doubt creeping in. "I've run the numbers, Dr. Westfield. The gene mutation at the core of this disease, we can target it directly." He raised an eyebrow, his expression mocking. "You're a junior researcher, Dr. Carter, and yet you're telling me you've solved what the entire field has failed to? This could be a glitch, a misreading in your data, nothing more." And then it hit her. This wasn't just about proving her science. This was about proving her worth. They didn't see her, not as a scientist, not as someone who could change the world. They had already decided. She wasn't enough. But here's the truth. That wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. If this story resonates with you, if it makes you wonder, what happens next? Or, how could they dismiss her like that? Then hit subscribe. Because what's coming next is more than just a scientific breakthrough. It's a fight for recognition, a fight for a place at the table. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when the world realizes it's underestimated her. It began, like so many pivotal moments, with a quiet, almost invisible disbelief. Dr. Miriam Carter had just finished her presentation. Her heart was racing, not from fear, but from the sharp thrill of knowing she had stumbled onto something monumental. Her slides were flawless, her data clear and undeniable. She could feel the weight of her findings hanging in the air, as if everything around her was begging to be heard, understood, acknowledged. But when the lights came back on and murmurs filled the room, something shifted. She felt a cold wave of doubt washing over her. "Is that it?" she thought. "Is that all I get? A few raised eyebrows and a dismissive comment from him?" She had just delivered her keynote at the world's largest medical symposium after months of collaboration with top scientists. And yet, Dr. Henry Westfield, one of the leading figures in the field, stood. He was towering, decades of experience making him nearly untouchable. He walked toward the projection screen and pointed at her data as if it were some irrelevant detail not worth his time. "Dr. Carter," he said, his voice thick with condescension, "I've been in this field for over 30 years. I've seen treatments rise and fall. But your proposal? This focus on genetics?" He shook his head with a smug smile. "This is reckless, unproven, a claim you shouldn't be making." His words dropped like stones into water. Miriam felt her chest tighten. She had expected questions, maybe even criticism, but not this deep, institutional dismissal. And then it hit her, the cold truth. This wasn't about science. This was about power. In that moment, Miriam understood something she had been trying to ignore for so long. Being right didn't matter. All the data, the credentials, the published papers, none of it counted if you didn't have the power to be heard. Because when you're a black woman in a predominantly white field, the problem is never the facts. The problem is getting people to believe you deserve to present them in the first place. The eyes in the room were on her, but they weren't seeing her. They saw a stereotype, a pre-written version of her, an image that had been formed long before she even walked onto the stage. Her research? It was groundbreaking. But that didn't matter. To them, it wasn't her discovery. It was just another claim they could choose to ignore. And Miriam? She didn't have the luxury of being just another researcher. Not when she had to fight for every ounce of respect. Not when every small victory felt like it needed to be earned 1,000 times over. She stood there, still, as the room hummed with uncertainty, her own heartbeat the loudest sound in her head. She wanted to speak. She wanted to stand tall and present her research as undeniable. But deep down, she knew the truth. It wasn't about what she said. It was about who she was. No matter how brilliant, no matter how right, it never felt like enough. And at that moment, standing on that stage, with all eyes on her, Miriam made a choice. She would have to fight for this discovery, not with data, not with research, but with something far harder to prove: her worth. The hallway outside the conference room buzzed with activity. Scientists, doctors, and researchers hurried past, lost in their own world, not sparing Miriam a second glance. A few offered quick, polite good jobs as they walked by, but none of them truly saw her. The indifference felt heavy, like an invisible wall between them and her. She paused at a corner, leaning against the cool marble of the hallway. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from her assistant. "Tomorrow's meeting is confirmed. The president's advisor wants to see you, but Henry's office just called. They've canceled your follow-up." The words hit her hard, like a punch to the gut. Canceled? Her stomach twisted. Dr. Westfield wasn't just rejecting her work, he was rejecting her. He wasn't just questioning her research, he was pushing her out of the conversation altogether. She squeezed the phone tighter, the cold glass biting into her palm. It was a harsh reminder of how fragile her progress was in this world. A world where a single dismissive gesture could wipe away everything she'd worked for. "You're wasting your time, Miriam. You'll never get through with a proposal like this," she whispered to herself, her voice hollow. The doubts echoed in her mind. Doubts from people who never bothered to understand her, who couldn't see beyond their own limited views. The labs around her were full of voices she could never truly join, full of people who looked through her, not at her. It wasn't just Westfield's rejection. It was the weight of every rejection she'd ever faced. Being a black woman in science wasn't just about proving herself over and over. It was about being constantly pushed to the margins, always forced to explain why she deserved to be in the room in the first place. And for what? So they could just ignore her when it suited them? But Miriam knew something else. She wasn't going to sit back and let them push her aside. Not this time. She wouldn't let their words define her. The weight of their ignorance wasn't hers to carry. "I'll show them," Miriam muttered under her breath, her voice steady with resolve. With each step she took past the crowded labs, past the people who barely even acknowledged her, Miriam's determination grew. The world had tried to make her feel small. It had tried to bury her brilliance under layers of doubt, but Miriam knew better. She wasn't just another woman in a lab coat. She wasn't just another data point at a conference. She was a trailblazer, and no one could take that from her. She refused to back down. Now that you've seen what Miriam is up against, just imagine what she'll do to turn it around. If you don't want to miss how this battle unfolds, subscribe to the channel. The office was still. Outside, the world had faded into night, the kind of silence that makes even the glow of a computer screen feel alive, like a heartbeat in the dark. Miriam sat hunched over, her eyes tired but sharp, tracing through rows of data that now seemed to pulse with a new, urgent energy. It had been weeks of grueling work, months of testing. And yet, here she was again, alone, questioning, wondering if it was all worth it. But tonight, something was different. Something clicked. Her fingers hovered over the mouse. The cursor stopped above a gene sequence. It was a small part of the data, one she had scanned 100 times before. But this time, her pulse quickened. There was something there, something she hadn't seen until now. She zoomed in, making the image clearer, larger. And then, it hit her. Her breath caught in her throat. This was it. No one had noticed it before. Not Dr. Westfield with all his years of experience. Not her colleagues with their degrees and reputations. No one had seen it, not even her, until this very moment. The cure. Right there, in front of her. It wasn't a grand, complicated solution. It wasn't some world-changing, futuristic breakthrough. It was simple, clean. A small mutation in the gene sequence they'd all missed. A tiny change that had been hiding in plain sight. Miriam leaned in, staring at the screen, her breath steadying as she connected the dots. The patterns lined up. The data fit together. She didn't need to double-check. She knew it. She already had the cure. The problem. The whole approach to treatment had been wrong. They'd been looking in the wrong place, using methods that were too rigid, too complicated. But this was it. The missing piece. The simple, overlooked answer that had always been there. A slow smile spread across her face, a quiet triumph. She had it. The cure wasn't just a possibility anymore. It was real. It was in her hands. For the first time that night, she leaned back in her chair, letting the weight of what she'd just discovered settle over her. The exhaustion, the doubt, everything faded away, replaced by the quiet shock of knowing that she had found what no one else had. No more waiting, no more wondering if she was enough, no more silence. This was her moment. She could already picture it, the headlines, the press conferences, the praise. But more than that, she saw the patients, the families, the lives that would be changed. The cure was real. It was here. And it was hers. Miriam didn't need to prove herself anymore. She had already done it. To them. To herself. She stood up, pacing the room, her heart racing, not from excitement, but from the steady, quiet thrill of knowing she had done more than find the cure. She had reclaimed her place. The power they had tried to take from her. She had taken it back. And this time, she wasn't backing down. The next morning, the conference room was alive with anticipation. Dr. Henry Westfield, the seasoned expert, sat at the head of the table. His notes were neatly arranged, his posture confident. He was prepared to tear down Miriam Carter's research, to remind everyone that her bold claims were nothing more than the naive ideas of a young scientist who had overreached. His mind was already running through his criticisms, ready to discredit every data point she had presented. In his world, the established experts, the ones who held the power, always had the final word. Miriam, despite her groundbreaking work, was just a blip, a temporary spark that would soon fade. But today, things were different. As the door to the room opened, Miriam stepped in. She wasn't carrying flashy slides or complicated graphs to wow the crowd. She wasn't here to impress. She was here to present something far more powerful, proof. Quiet, undeniable proof that cut through the tension in the room like a knife. The whispers stopped as she walked to the front. Every eye was on her. She didn't look at the papers spread before her, nor did she glance at the screen. Instead, she locked eyes with Dr. Westfield, her gaze steady and unwavering. "I didn't just find an anomaly, Doctor Westfield," she said, her voice calm but strong. "I found a cure." The words landed like a challenge. For a beat, there was silence. The kind of silence that feels heavier than any sound. The kind that makes you question what's real. Westfield's confident grin faltered. Just for a second. He was used to being the smartest in the room, used to controlling the narrative, used to dismissing others with a few well-chosen words. But Miriam wasn't just another challenger. She wasn't some upstart trying to take her place. She was the one who was right. With quiet authority, Miriam began laying out her research, her findings, her data, the cure she had discovered. It wasn't just a presentation, it was a quiet revolution. She was showing them all what they had overlooked, what they had dismissed. The room wasn't just witnessing her discovery, they were witnessing a shift in power. The moment when truth stopped belonging to the established authorities and landed in the hands of someone they hadn't expected. She didn't need to prove herself, not to him, not to anyone. The data spoke for itself. "Do you see this?" Miriam asked, her eyes still fixed on Westfield. "This is the breakthrough you said was impossible. This is the cure you said couldn't exist." The weight of her words hit the room. It wasn't just about the science anymore. It was about the meaning behind the discovery. It meant she was right, and they were wrong. A few colleagues shifted in their seats, some trying to avoid her gaze, others biting their tongues. Westfield's expression changed, his arrogance slipping away. His once firm posture began to falter. Miriam let the silence linger, just long enough to make the moment sink in. "You don't have to believe me," she said, her voice steady and unshaken. "But you will acknowledge it, because this works." In that moment, Dr. Westfield knew, no matter how hard he tried, no matter how much authority he tried to assert, he could no longer deny her. Miriam had shifted the balance of power. For the first time in his career, he was the one who was on the defensive. But Miriam wasn't done. She wasn't here to settle for an apology or bask in the satisfaction of being right. She had a bigger mission. She wasn't just here to prove herself. She was here to change everything, to bring her discovery to the world, and no amount of resistance, no amount of doubt could stop her now. She had found the cure. She had found her place, and now she was ready to lead. Miriam's discovery spread like wildfire. What had once been dismissed as impossible was now hailed as groundbreaking. The medical community couldn't ignore her any longer. Publications rushed to feature her research. Leading research institutions reached out, eager to confirm her data. And suddenly, everyone wanted to know what she had found. As Dr. Westfield scrambled to catch up, trying to salvage his credibility, Miriam walked through the halls of the institution that had once looked past her. Now, there was no ignoring her. People stopped and nodded respectfully. Her name wasn't whispered in hushed tones as a disruptive force anymore. It was on everyone's lips as the woman who had solved a problem that had stumped the best minds for years. But Miriam Carter hadn't just discovered a cure for a disease. She had uncovered something far more profound: the right to be heard. For the first time, her voice was powerful, undeniable. The silence that had once surrounded her now felt like a distant memory. She had reclaimed her place in the conversation, and this time, no one could take it from her. And the world? It wasn't about to forget her. And here's the big payoff: the discovery, the revolution. Miriam didn't just find the cure. She proved that no obstacle is too big to overcome. If you're inspired by her journey, subscribe for more stories that will move you and reveal the truth. Don't miss out.